In the same breath, speakers of Low Saxon will tell you they can't understand the speakers of the next village, but that they can use their dialect deep into Germany. That's because Low Saxon is a hot mess. But there's method to the madness. My name's Martin, and we're dissecting dialects. Let's dive in. The first thing to keep in mind is that Low Saxon does not have a standard variety. So each and every village speaks it slightly differently. And that's because it's a dialect continuum. It gradually changes from one town to the next village. And for instance, dialect A and B will understand each other better than they will understand dialect X and Y. But dialect X and Y will understand dialect Z better than they will understand dialect A and B. And that's a dialect continuum. But there are sort of little groups within that vast area. There's so much variation that I can't go over everything, but I need to pick out little bits and bobs here and there to show you what I'm talking about exactly. So there are 4 main dialect groups, if you will, and that depends on how you look at it. So the first one is Northern Low Saxon, the second one is East Low German, the third one is Eastphalian, and the fourth one is Westphalian. Now, there are people who say that there's a fifth one, and that's Dutch Low Saxon, because that's influenced by Dutch. But if we take that logic, we could also argue that there's a German Low Saxon, because that's influenced by High German. So there's your first difficulty already. They both more or less all work the same. Let's first set a baseline here. Let's see what they do. None of the Low Saxon varieties have followed the High German consonant shift. Ich mache in High German became ich mache. So let's zoom into the most conservative variety of Low Saxon, which is Westphalian, which is, as the name might imply, spoken in Westphalia. But it also stretches out into the Netherlands, and basically all varieties spoken in the Netherlands, except for Gronings, are considered Westphalian. So what makes it Westphalian? There's a thing called a vowel break, and it's comparable to what you'll hear in English. Certain English varieties tend to bend certain vowels, which you'll mostly hear in Northern Ireland and in Jamaica, if I'm not mistaken. They don't say Jamaica, but they say Jamaica. And this vowel bend is what you'll hear in Westphalia as well. So for instance, if we take the word to know, or a slightly older word in English, to wit, in my variety, it would be weten. So it has this bend. It goes weten. And that strange rise and then fall, that's a vowel break. And if you listen to other varieties of Low Saxon, they don't have that. They say weten or wetten or weten, but they don't say weten. You'll also hear it in other sounds, like for instance in the word to walk, which in Low Saxon is lopen. In my dialect, you can clearly hear lopen. Other varieties say lopen, which is an upward curve, which you'll expect if you're an English speaker, or lopen with a flat O. So weten and lopen as opposed to weten and lopen or weten and lopen. Now, Westphalian is considered one of the most conservative varieties of Low Saxon because there are some grammatical issues that other varieties of Low Saxon have lost. For instance, a grammatical case, like my Westphalian variety has lost it as well, but I know of certain speakers who still use, for instance, he lives on the mountain, he woont op een berge. In my dialect, that would be he woont op een berg. And as you can already hear, I pronounce the word berg quite different from what you heard in the first example. So there's a wide variety of vowel sounds in Westphalian varieties alone. So while there are lots of things that happen in Westphalia that are more or less the same, let's zoom in on my Twente region, which I'm most familiar with, to give you an idea of how wildly pronunciations may vary. So let's just take one word, the word work. In my dialect, that would be werk. But we also have werk, wark, wijk, werk, werk, and werk. And that's just in one small region about the size of the city of London. So Westphalian also makes a distinction between masculine, feminine, and neutered nouns. So den kerel, die vrouwen, dat kind. And this also influences the adjectives that say something about the noun. So for instance, den groten kerel, de grote vrouwen, dat grote kind. And other varieties of Low Saxon, like Dutch, have a two-gendered system now, which is generally gendered and ungendered. So, de man, de vrouw, het kind. Let's quickly move on to the next dialect group, which is Northern Low Saxon. And if I'm not mistaken, the most prominent one as well, because if you're ever going to run into Plattdeutsch stuff, it's bound to be Northern Low Saxon because they're the most prolific, they're the most out there, they're the most forward when it comes to implementing Low Saxon into the school curriculums. What makes Northern Low Saxon Northern Low Saxon? So they have, if you compare it to Westphalian, because that's the most conservative variety, a slightly reduced difficulty in grammatical features. So they don't have an extended cases system like Westphalian used to have. And they don't make a distinction anymore between masculine, feminine, and neuter. And a large chunk of Northern Low Saxon actually used to be Frisian. So they have Frisian features in their Low Saxon still. Like for instance, the personal pronoun yim for you people, whereas in my dialect that would be ilu. But also they applied some hypercorrection. For instance, the word to let, which in Westphalian is later, and late, you know, the process of being too late. Later. So later and later. In Northern Low Saxon, they decided, well, we don't want the distinction anymore, so we're just gonna turn everything into lota or lot. Because there's another feature there. Northern Low Saxon has ditched the final E. So I said ik make or ik late. Northern Low Saxon doesn't do that anymore. They say ik maak and ik laat. I need to do a little correction here. I just told you that Northern Low Saxon doesn't make a distinction anymore between a and o. So they don't say ik maak, they say ik moog. The words to wit and to walk would be weten and lopen with a slightly upcurved vowel sound. People in Groningen would even say witen and lopen. Now let's move on to East Low German. East Low German is probably the farthest gone, sadly. Many people from this area decided to up and leave, and they moved to Brazil, of all places. And they specifically moved to Espírito Santo. Sorry for butchering that pronunciation there. But one thing they kept, naturally they brought their language with them, Pomeranian, and you still have some 300,000 speakers there. So they speak Pomerano now, which is slightly influenced by Portuguese. And so what makes Eastern Low German Eastern Low German? So one particular thing that they do that other varieties don't is that they pronounce the last syllable in verbs, for instance. Take these examples I've used before again, like weten and lopen. They don't say that, they say weten and lopen, which is quite like Dutch, surprisingly. So they've decided not to follow the whole syllabic consonant thing, which other varieties all over do. East Low German is also where Plattdeutsch comes from. So most Mennonites speak a form of East Low German. Naturally, you can hear the whole itinerary of where they've been. So they've picked up bits and bobs and traces of, you know, state languages of states they've been: Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Russia, Canada, the United States, all the way down through Latin America into Southern America. There's a very interesting lady on here on YouTube who's called Disha Michel, and she speaks a form of, I think, Mexican Mennonite Low German. And it's very interesting to hear how her language has been influenced by all these different places that their ancestors have been. So do check it out. So the final one is Eastphalian, and it's very confusing because there's also an East Westphalian, which is spoken in Westphalia, but they sort of merge into each other, like I've explained before. But what makes it distinctly Eastphalian? One thing that other varieties have ditched is a prefix in the, I think it's the past participle, I need to look that up, but instead of ik heb gaan, like most varieties would say, I have gone, they'd say ik heb gegaan. And I'm also using a g sound, which other Low Saxon varieties in Germany don't use. So they say ik ga, whereas in Eastphalian, people would say ik ga. Like for instance, the big city of Göttingen in their own Low Saxon is Göttingen. And one other feature of Eastphalian is that they've shortened certain vowels after that Westphalian vowel bend, which I've talked about before. And it's very curious to me that no researcher has ever dug into this, is that this happens in the east of the Netherlands as well. Like for instance, the word for spoon, which in my dialect is lepel, but in proper Westphalian, that would be liapel. And if you move from my dialect into Eastphalia, you'll have lapel, lepel, liapel, lepel. So we're back to square one. But the difference between my dialect and Eastphalian is that Eastphalian is influenced by High German, whereas my dialect is influenced by Dutch. That's the difference. One other thing that they still have is mich and dich, which is comparable to High German mich and dich. So that's it. We've gone full circle. There's much more to be said about this, but this is a general overview of the sort of main dialects there are in Low Saxon. If you like this, hit like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. See you next time. Hoort hall.